Clem Sunter, that must remind you of your days when you were in a rock band. I'm not so sure too many people know about that part of your past, Clem.
Yeah, no, I used to play guitar at school, and then a friend of mine and I went to Paris, and we played in a French restaurant. We were called Les Garçons, and it was the time of François Hardy and Tous les garçons et les filles. And J'entends siffler le train was the other song we played. And then when we went up to university together, we played in the local club on Friday night. And so it was fun. Yeah.
What is it about music that gives people more balance in their brain? I'm sure you must have looked at this, because when I look at you, you were head of the Golden Uranium division at Anglo American. You are now well known as a futurist. You were in a rock band. It's kind of a very good balanced brain that you possess.
Yeah, I've tried to do a bit of everything, and I realize that life actually is a balance, and one shouldn't get too passionate about one area of one's life, because then you lose out on all the others. So yeah, you should have a range of pursuits, and then find a balance which maximizes your happiness.
Clem Sunter, you are very well known in South Africa, loved and admired by our community. But your real passion, nowadays anyway, is about entrepreneurship. And you gave me a call earlier in the week to say you'd watched the interview that I had with GG Alcock on Friday and that you loved it. He's talking your language.
Yeah, it was pioneering stuff because we have so many economists talking on mainstream media about what should be done to the economy without knowing anything about the township economies and the informal sector. And I've never heard anybody actually speak with authority on that area. And GG Alcock and his whole theory of Casonomics uh, absolutely blew me away, because it's the first time that I've listened to somebody who goes in and helps all those businesses in the township that actually, for me, should one day be part of the formal sector of the economy. It's not that I want them to be regulated, I just want them to be recognized, because, as he said, if you take the real unemployment rate, it could be as low as 12% and not the 40 to 50% that people talk about. And, if we want to build up a new economy, that's what we've got to talk about. How do you empower people to move from that informal sector into a business in the township and then in the mainstream economy, and then a real star, move it overseas? And I've recently written an article about Springboks and how they managed to move from being a white to a non-racial team and still win the cups. And it's because of the incredible pipeline that they've established to train young rugby players. We should have a similar pipeline from small businesses in the township through to hopefully, for some, international status.
But we've got that pipeline. If you listen carefully to what GG says, he says it's an incredibly big market that exists, and there are some really high quality entrepreneurs who are in the township, but they can't get recognized. They can't get funding. When they put their hands up and say, we want to be part of the 500 black industrialists, Mr. A and C, well, they aren't connected. And as a consequence, they don't even get their foot in the door. Whereas influential people get all the attention.
Yeah, and that is what has got to be talked about in what I call an economic codessa, because I think Cyril is now beginning to see that you resolve problems with a multiplicity of sources. You move from Eskom to looking at the general population and how they can provide electricity and provide some answer to the problem. And I feel so strongly that it's not about some central plan which is going to magically work in South Africa to create an extra 3 or 4 million jobs. It's actually saying how do we actually build from the ground up with what we have? And what came out yesterday when I listened to the interview you did with GG was that there is this incredible economy. It's there, and it's actually flourishing. And we've got to recognize it and say, how can we build on that economy? You know, one of the points I make about South Africa is that if you look this century, we haven't done badly as an economy. Compare us to the UK and compare the stock markets. Um, the LC has gone up from around 8 to 10,000 to 65,000. The British stock market has done nothing in the last 23 years. And yes, the rand has gone down by half, from 10 to the pound to 20 to the pound, but you'd have made 4 times more money by investing in South Africa over the last 22 years than you would have made in the UK. So we all should get rid of that doom and gloom and say, why is it that our economy remains vibrant compared to an advanced economy like the UK? What is it? And I thought GG uh, got the answers right. It's because we've got a very imaginative people on the ground in the townships who are doing these magnificent jobs of converting bulk food deliveries into small deliveries and doing ways of other things which save people on petrol and stuff like this. How can we take all that imagination and turn it into something bigger? That is the central question. It's not creating 500 industrialists with very big companies from scratch. It's about saying, how can we start with those million people, some of whom will become those incredible stars?
It's very interesting. If we go back to your rugby analogy, it's a little bit like us, and maybe test this on you, like having a massive development program where there are people being grown and stars being made, potential stars, but they're not being recognized. So instead of recognizing those stars and taking them up to the next level and letting them play international rugby, we are picking only from a few elite schools, people that we know, people that are influenced or have connections.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm afraid to say, around the world, connections count. They count in America. They count in Europe and elsewhere. Connections always count. But the real difference is that people with no connections can make it into the mainstream economy. I mean, one of the people I quote in the book "Thinking the Future" is Steve Jobs. I mean, he came from nowhere with Steve Wozniak. They started a business in a garage, Apple, and they turned it into this incredible worldwide phenomenon because there were sufficient um, support systems along the way for them to do that. And all I'm trying to say is we've got to have a similar pipeline here in South Africa. So if there is an economic Cadessa, it's about how do we take what already exists in South Africa in terms of energy and imagination for business in the townships and create that pipeline which will allow a few of them to become worldwide stars, because that's what happens elsewhere in the world. And as you rightly say, we don't do that at the moment. I mean, even the media, we should have an entrepreneur of the month where somebody is selected from a township economy and said, he's a star now, and this is what he's done to create a viable business, instead of only covering businesses that are listed on the JSE and we've got to now start really delving into what really exists in the township economies. And it was just so refreshing to hear GG talking on that subject.
Makazole Mapimpi, that kind of a superstar who's waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, it's absolutely there are stars. I mean, I for many years talked about Siubelela Zuza, who was a young man um, in the Eastern Cape, who started playing with chemicals and causing minor explosions in his mother's kitchen, and then decided to invent a rocket fuel and managed to beat the young young space record in terms of sending an amateur rocket into space, and it got recognized in America, and he got a minor planet named after him um, by some American institution. Now, that kind of story should have been across the pages of all newspapers in order to inspire, uh, young people to do what he did. But we just don't have that. The papers tend to block out all the stuff about, township economies, and only deal with the mainstream economy. And I just think when I was given those examples yesterday of how people could save their money on not having to go into town to shopping malls, or not have to wait into queues in township malls because there was somebody local that could actually provide the food and everything else. You can apply that to so many other things. I mean, talked about accommodation, and yes, there's a lot of people renting out houses in the township, um, that where they have spare space. But then it suddenly occurred to me, why don't we now start building houses? Why isn't there a substitute for the RDP program, where you have local builders and they come up with better structures than what we unfortunately see at the moment, which have a better chance of keeping people out of the cold, and in summer not roasting in the heat. I just feel that there are just so many problems that could be resolved, including the unemployment problem, if we really, really focused on what we can do to turn the township economy into a real thing.
A few years ago, you had a debate with Julius Malema, which is still very famous and easy to find on YouTube. Millions of people have watched it. Is this an area maybe where I know that ideologically you're on different pages, but maybe where someone even like him could see the benefit?
Yeah, well, I tried to persuade him that evening, Alec, about um, the way he could adapt his, and really deep belief about creating economic freedom, and I said, I'm just as much of an economic freedom fighter as you are, Julius. It's just that my definition of economic freedom, pardon me, my definition of economic freedom is where you set the entrepreneurs free. It's not taking the land and having it owned by the state or the banks or the mines or whatever it is. It's really trying to create and enable entrepreneurs on the ground to grow in South Africa, because we already have, as GG showed, we already have that competence being shown every day. And in fact, we probably have a more vibrant economy than most other economies in the world at the moment because of that. But we don't recognize it. And I just want it to be recognized. I want to be recognized by mainstream economists who know much more about economic theory than me, but how it can then be built into some kind of new economic model. But most of all, I want it to be recognized by the government and by the media and everybody else. So, yeah, um, it's just that now we're beginning to get real information about it through a person like GG. Maybe that is what could be the turning point of establishing a real summit, a genuine economic Cadessa would be to start with those facts.
You've written a lot about foxes and hedgehogs, but the foxes seem to be the people we're talking about now who are in township economies, who are coming against overwhelming odds, but using human ingenuity to make things happen.
Yeah, I've used this for years, but it's mainly to do with looking at the future. That a hedgehog will take a single forecast and bet all his money on that single forecast coming true, whereas a fox will play different scenarios, look at the flags, and then attach probabilities to the different scenarios, and then based on that probability mixture, make a financial decision or any other decision. But of course, that's exactly what entrepreneurs are about. They're about how much money can I actually put into my idea? How can I turn it into a success? So they're dealing with uncertainties all the time. So they are natural foxes. And as you rightly said earlier on, one of the problems at the moment is that our formal banking and financial system is not hasn't created the openings that you get in places like Bangladesh with the Grameen Bank and in other countries in South America, where there are banks that specialize in sort of small financial loans. I know Capitec is trying to move into that market, but we've really got to consider now how we can embrace that market, which, it was an amazing statistic, which brings our unemployment rate probably down from, the mid 40s to about 12%. And it just amazes me that, this qualification isn't used by anybody in the media or any well-known economists, because if that is the case, we've got something to build on. It's not this sort of dreadful kind of everything's been a mess for the last 15 years, and we're sort of starting from scratch. It's not like that at all. And as I said, compared to the UK, the average investor would have made 4 times more money in the last 23 years here in South Africa than he would have in the UK. So we shouldn't be so desperately unhappy about our current economic situation. It's about now taking it and turning it into something better.
You've spoken a bit today about an economic Cadessa. We've spoken about this in the past as well. I guess the important thing is who you get to the economic Cadessa, because if you don't get these township foxes there, it's going to just be the same old talk shop that we seem to specialize in South Africa.
Absolutely, Alec, you've hit the nail on the head. I've said that the Cadessa you put together are not just the usual academics and unionists and government people to come up with another plan. You actually get the people who've run real businesses. And I would find people like GG, but obviously the guys actually in the township who have done successful businesses. I would get some of the stars, the Discovery, and we've got so many companies which were founded by genuine entrepreneurs. The mining industry started in South Africa through the entrepreneurs of the 19th century. They came here. It wasn't a government-induced kind of industry. It was started by entrepreneurs who thought of a way of making money. So I want to see the real lineup for this economic Cadessa, including those sort of guys with real experience in building up businesses, as well as some of the township stars, and then build up a plan which has 10, let's say, real targets in the short term. I'd love Cyril Ramaphosa then to go on television and say, this is what we're going to do, just like we did in the pandemic. And then obviously have this council, consulting in the background. And we turn it into a sort of, a doable 5-year plan rather than just another written document.
And create and laud our own world champions who, by any measure, exist and have succeeded. Clem
Well, I
Sunter.
mean, whether you approve of him or not, Elon Musk went to Pretoria Boys High, and he's the richest man in the world today. And I mean, Pretoria Boys High included the current Booker Prize winner at the school in the same decade in the 1980s. I mean, there can't be virtually any school in the world that can boast those two achievements in one decade. But we did it at Pretoria Boys High, just like our Springbok team are the current World Cup holders. And, we did it. People would have said, 30 years ago, you could never achieve that thing of, building up a non-racial team and still winning the cups. We've done it. We've shown that we've got the talent, and we've got to do the same with the economy. And in the way that it is merit-based, that's what I point out, is you don't win rugby games if your team isn't based on merit. But because of the development and the training and all the stuff that goes into creating a good rugby team, you can do it, and you can do exactly the same in economy. Because the one thing about an economy is you buy something from somebody else because it's cheaper or it's more efficient or it's whatever it is. Usually economies in terms of the sort of free market are based on merit, and that's what I want to see, because it already exists. It already exists in that township economy, which is highly competitive and in producing people who are genuine foxes who can run businesses.
Clem Sunter, futurist, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.